Hello and welcome back to these series of videos on how I use my Euro modular system in live performance. In this video we're going to make some noise and we're going to set up a basic patch, and in doing that hopefully highlight some of the basic principles of how a modular synthesizer works. So we're going to be so this is going to cover the theory bit. Like I said in the previous video, I'm not going to get too technical if I can help it, but obviously there is some principles you need to know about beforehand, and the best way to demonstrate that I think is by setting up a basic patch. So what we're going to do is we're going to start off with an oscillator. Here we have a couple of oscillators that we looked at in the overview. An oscillator is a module that actually produces sound. The sound's pretty basic, as you'll hear in a minute. Most of the modules on this system are analogue. Probably heard the term analogue before, analogue and digital. Analogue basically means continually varying. Digital means discretely put into bits, basically. But basically a lot of these modules are analogue. The oscillator we're going to look at is this one here, the Doepfer A110 VCO. VCO means voltage controlled oscillator, and voltage control is what is the thing that makes modular synthesis and all synthesis really be able to do lots of different things, because what we do is with voltage control we can control lots of different parameters, different things with a voltage. Now a bog standard analog VCO like this produces very simple waveforms. A waveform is just a varying voltage going up and down. This one produces 4 different waveforms which come out of these 4 sockets at the bottom here. You probably can't, I don't think you can be able to see it on the camera, but basically this one is a sawtooth wave, a square wave, triangle wave, sine wave. They're very basic varying voltages that go up and down in a repeated pattern, and produce, and they're going at such a rate that when you plug them into a speaker, the speaker moves at the same rate that the voltage is varying, and that produces a note or a tone. Let's have a listen at one. So I'm going to plug this into the sine wave output here. This is a patch lead, 3.5mm patch lead. Plug that into the sine wave output, and then I'm going to plug that into my mixer, one of my mixer inputs here, mixer input 1. Probably see some lights going there showing that we've got some sound going in there. The output of the mixer is coming out of here, and that's just going down to my other mixer, which is connected to my monitor speakers. And you should hear the sound on well, I'm just using the built-in microphone in the camera, so it's not particularly good quality, but you should hear it okay. So if we turn this channel up, we should hear something. Very exciting. Turn it down. That's a sine wave. That's what a sine wave sounds like. Not particularly exciting, I know. And yeah, as you can see, as I turn it up, it's just going on forever. And basically an oscillator will oscillate as soon as it gets power. It'll start oscillating and create the sound. Okay, so it's not going off, and you can see it's constant volume here. Okay, what I can do with the oscillator controls, I have a octave switch here, so I can there's a tune knob here which lets me tune it up and down slightly. and the other controls are for when I'm going to control. This is to do with the voltage control. I can change things, as you'll see when we patch them together, and this is the amount. I'll turn these down now. Okay. So that's basically all an oscillator does. It just makes a pitch like that. Okay, let's just have a listen to some of the other waveforms. That was a sine wave. I'll plug it into the triangle wave. Very similar, but a little bit brighter. Got a square wave. And a sawtooth wave. And those are the only waveforms that this oscillator will produce. I can actually, it is actually creating those waveforms all at the same time, so I could actually take different leads out and mix those together, but I'm not going to bother doing that now. So let's plug it back into. Let's put it on the sawtooth wave. Turn it down a bit. Now let's look at what we mean by voltage control. Just an oscillator producing one pitch like that isn't much use. We need to be able to create different pitches of the note, and we can do that by using these sockets here, these two actually here, which will say this one says CV1, that one says CV2. CV stands for control voltage. Now, as this is an oscillator, if we feed something into the control voltage 1, that will, depending on what the voltage is I feed into there, that will change the pitch of the oscillator, i.e. the note that's coming out of the oscillator. So at the moment there's nothing fed into there, so it's just a bog standard one pitch. The only way I can change it is by altering the tune knob, which is fine for tuning it, but it's no use being able to play music with. So we take another patch lead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a module here, which is a control voltage source. So all this does is let me this just outputs a set control voltage depending on what the knob position is. So it's a low voltage turned up, it's a high voltage. So again, if I plug that into the control voltage input here, turn the volume up, hopefully now when I turn this knob up it should change the pitch, just like the tune knob will do. Great. So that's a little bit more interesting. Good for weird effects or do sort of clanger impressions. So great for that. Not very musical though. Let's, rather than just a fixed control voltage, let's use a voltage that's going up and down. So I'll use one of my low frequency oscillators here. Let's use this one over here. So like I say, the low frequency oscillators, as I explained before, produce are very similar to these oscillators, except that the waveform it produces is much slower. So for example, if I was to plug the output of the sine wave output from the low frequency oscillator, if I turn it up so it's going really, really fast, you can just hear it because it's creating a pitch. If I turn it down, you can't hear it because it's way below the human hearing range. So it's no good as a sound source. But if I plug my oscillator back in there, but then I use get the sine wave output from the low frequency oscillator, and then I feed that into CV2. CV2 is it's just the same CV1, but I can control by how this is the amount control here, this CV2 knob here, so that lets me change by how much the pitch will vary from the low frequency oscillator. I'll turn that up. Then I can turn the speed of the low frequency oscillator up. So if I say use a square wave, okay, so you can see how we can control the pitch of this oscillator from another oscillator. That gives us some quite interesting effects. Still not particularly musical, so how do I create different notes? Okay, so let's now, rather than altering the pitch from the low frequency oscillator, we're going to look at very quickly on some of the modules at the top here. If you remember from the previous video, these are the sort of sequencers and clocks, clock modules. This one here is the clock generator, and if I press the start stop button, you probably see all these lights flashing here. This is set to 94. Let's set it to faster. Let's speed that up a bit. It's 105 beats per minute now. Okay. So, and all these, I can set all these different outputs here to be multiples of 105 beats per minute. You can divide it by different factors or multiply it by different factors. So you can see all these are flashing at different rates, but they are all related to the speed 105 beats per minute. Now if I take a lead and out of, say, this socket here, so basically this is flashing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 2, 3, 7. There basically is a voltage trigger just coming out of there every time that flashes. If I feed that into my sequencer clock input, you can now probably see that the lights on the sequencer are advancing each time that light flashes. So what's happening now with this sequencer, whereas before I was feeding the control voltage into CV1, before I was feeding in a voltage from a low frequency oscillator which was varying up and down, so the pitch was going up and down. If I now take the CV and put it into the output of this row of control voltage, I can set a specific voltage on each of these knobs. So the voltage coming out of here is whatever these knobs are set to whenever that light appears above one of the 8 steps. Okay, so if we turn that up now, you should hear and I can change. If I change to an output that's flashing much faster, the sequencer will run much faster. So now we've got a nice repeating pattern of notes. It sounds a lot more interesting. It's not exactly musical yet, I wouldn't say, but you can obviously tell there's a definite sequence of 8 notes. I could change this so that it's not 8. I could do 6 notes or as many notes as I want, really, but except up to 8. But we're just running the 8-step sequencer at its full length at the moment. So that's how we can control different elements of the modular system by patching these leads in to control, using control voltages or triggers or clocks. This is basically a trigger that's triggering, going to the clock input of here, which is moving this sequence along one step at a time. If I change the rate, you'll probably see that starts moving faster. If I turn this beat per minute down, it's moving slower. So I'll listen to that quickly. Much slower. Turn the BPM up. So that is how the basic principle of how we connect everything up and be able to control different elements of the different modules. We'll leave the video here, and in the next video we'll look at how we can make it a little bit more musical and add some more elements to make it more interesting. See you next time.